Hello, everyone, and welcome to the ISJL Virtual Vacation. This is Southern Jewish music, Jews, and country. My name is Nora Katz, and I'm the Director of Heritage and Interpretation at the Institute of Southern Jewish Life. Normally, I serve as your tour guide for these episodes, but this winter, the History and Heritage and Interpretation departments at the ISJL had the pleasure of welcoming two virtual interns from my alma mater, Carleton College, in Northfield, Minnesota. Among many other projects, they each developed episodes of the ISJL Virtual Vacation that I am so excited to share with you. Today's episode is the brainchild of Clara Posner, who is going to serve as our guest host today. It's also the first episode of what we hope will be a long series all about Southern Jewish music. In working on this episode together, we found so much rich content that we realized we couldn't fit it all in just one episode. Consider this an introduction to a rich and nuanced topic. There is always more to explore. Clara, take it away.
Howdy. So today we're talking about Jews and country music. I know, Jewish country music may seem like an unusual combination, but the intersection of Judaism and Americana music has been expanding ever since the American folk music revival of the 1940s and 50s, resulting in a group of contemporary artists who are exploring their Jewish identity through new musical fusions. Although the Jewish community doesn't necessarily play a dominant role in Nashville's music row or contemporary music production, Jews have contributed substantially to the genre, illuminating broader themes of assimilation and acculturation in both Southern and American Jewish history. Before we start, I wanted to acknowledge that this video is only scratching the surface of this subject. There's a lot of interesting scholarship on the history and evolution of Jewish country music, but we're here to hit some of the highlights, leaving you with questions and lots more to learn. In fact, there's so much to explore that we'll be back next month to focus specifically on Jews and bluegrass. In this episode, we'll explore the history of country music and how the presence of Jews in the industry has shifted over the last few decades. We'll talk to Stacy Harris, a Nashville-based writer and music historian, about her work documenting the contributions of Jews on Nashville's music row. Then we'll meet Joe Buchanan, a musician currently marrying Jewish tradition with country music in his home state of Texas. Stay tuned to the end of the episode for an exclusive performance with Joe. So where better to start this country-themed episode than Nashville, Tennessee, famously dubbed Music City, USA. So here's some brief background on Nashville. Music Row serves as the heart of Nashville's country music industry and has been home to talent agencies, recording studios, music trade associations, and music publishers since the 1950s. Based in Nashville is the Grand Ole Opry, one of the longest-lived and most popular showcases for country music, which started as a broadcasting show on the WSM in 1925. As country music gained popularity within Nashville during the mid-20th century, there were a few Jewish performers who appeared on stage, such as fiddler Maurice Blumen, who appeared at the Grand Ole Opry in the 1940s as a member of the band Cousin Wilbur and his Tennessee Mountaineers. Until the 1960s, Jews typically played more behind-the-scene roles in country music. In order to understand more about the relationship between the Jewish community and Nashville's music industry, we'll talk to author and music historian Stacy Harris, who wrote the article Kosher Country: Success and Survival on Nashville's Music Row. Her article emphasizes the range and diversity of roles Jews have played in Nashville in country music history. In her 1998 survey of Jews in country music for the Journal of Southern Jewish History, Stacy Harris noted that anti-Semitism was prevalent in Nashville music scene as late as the 1960s. For a series of interviews with members of the music industry, Harris addresses that although Jews frequently displayed Americanism and embraced the culture of country music as a means of fitting in, there was a fine line between outwardly expressing Jewish religious and ethnic identity and keeping it under the wraps in Nashville. It is an absolute pleasure to welcome Stacy Harris to the ISJL Virtual Vacation.
My name is Stacy Harris, and I call myself a polymath. Most people don't know what that means, including me up to a certain point when I looked it up and I said, oh, that sounds good. Polymath is somebody who basically has a lot of different interests and different levels of expertise, hopefully. And before I called myself a polymath, I said I was a print and broadcast journalist, author, just anything to do with communication. I've pretty much been involved in it, acting, script writing for TV, writing for movies, that kind of thing, just a little of everything. Kosher country recognizes the Jews that have been a part of the country music industry. And it also gives an idea of the obstacles that they have had to becoming part of the industry, and then also, along with becoming part of the industry, being accepted by the industry. And it mirrors the whole struggle to become part of the industry, to become accepted. It kind of mirrors the struggle that Jews have had historically, being accepted, and also kind of the ambivalence about, do we want to say who we are? Do we want to assimilate? And, what is the path of least resistance? And how do we stand up to those who stand up to and also educate the people that are discriminating against us? There was an article in the Jewish Forward that was written by Charles Hirschberg, and it was, I ran across it, I believe, at the library of it was called the Nashville Jewish Community Center at that time. And I was doing, I think, some genealogical research there, and ran across this article that I had never seen before. Had no idea that anybody had ever written about Jews in country music. Even when I saw it, it was outdated. So I said, somebody should be updating this. And of course, nobody was. So I said, well, I'll take it on. And I don't, to be very honest with you, I don't remember exactly how it was that maybe how I contacted Southern Jewish History or the Historical Society, rather. I do know that I tried to get this published in the Country Music Association the Country Music Foundation has a journal. It's called the Journal of Country Music, makes sense. And it is supposed to be a very scholarly publication, academic publication, but they weren't interested, very frankly. And as I wrote in the article, the editor said something to the effect of, the history of Jewish people in country music is kind of like writing about the history of left-handed people in country music. So with that mindset, I wasn't going to get very far with that. Once it was published, once the Southern Jewish Historical Society published the article, I did find interest, ironically, in a publication that I wrote for called Country Music People, but that publication came out of Great Britain. So sort of ironic to me that overseas there was more interest than there was in this country. Let me kind of dart out of time, because the Grand Ole Opry started in 1925, but Nashville was not really regarded as Music City, USA until the term was coined by a disc jockey named David Cobb during the 1950s. And even then, it was not the center that it is now. It became the center when the publishing companies got started here, and the recording companies, which up until, a few decades ago, they had to answer, the Nashville record companies had to answer to New York, the parent companies there. So Nashville became Music City at different points in time, but the interesting historically about that is that there could have been any number of other cities that could have become what we think of now as Nashville, Music City. It's just different happenstance, such as the building of the studio here by the Bradley brothers, which was known as the Bradley, I can't even, it's a tongue twister, the Bradley Barn or the Quonset hut. Owen Bradley established that, and so there was a place to go essentially, and that's how the recordings started to be made here. And then of course other studios followed and so forth. And so you have the history of the Grand Ole Opry, you have the history of the recording studios, you have this history of publishing in Nashville, and they all kind of came together where eventually it became a center for all of these things. It's always been there. There's always been, I mean, historically, there have always been Jews involved in the publishing end, even if that publishing end was concentrated in New York City or whatever originally. But most of the involvement early on was behind the scenes. You did have a Jewish member of the Grand Ole Opry, Luke Childry, but he was not recognized as a Jewish member of the Grand Ole Opry. I didn't even know that until I did the research, because it was not something that was publicized. You had Jewish musicians that were on the road. You had a bluegrass artist that was Jewish that played with Bill Monroe, the father of bluegrass music. So, and he would single this person out, you know, but, and that's where some of the, if you want to call it anti-Semitism began. It didn't begin, but it was where it was most noticeable, we'll say. But it was probably accepted in that at that time, and maybe no offense was taken. I don't know, because it was very blatant in one sense. It was very subtle in another, if that makes any sense. It's contradictory, of course, but society's changed, and with it, the norms have changed, I guess you would say. But so Jews have always had a presence in Nashville country music, typically behind the scenes. And as the roles of have expanded, then also the visibility is greater now. But it's still something where, as I wrote in the article, you don't have a Jewish country music association, where you at one point you had a Black country music association, and even now, that's, you know, with the Black artists that are gaining traction, they've been sort of absorbed into the industry. I think that the contribution of the Jewish songwriters and artists and publishers has been to maybe just create the awareness that we do have a history, because we pretty much blend in. There is not a lot of wanting to be distinct about our Jewishness. As I said, we don't have Jewish music industry members. We don't have Jewish members of the music industry who are, I don't want to say flaunting their Jewishness, but even expressing their Jewishness in their work. There just doesn't seem to be a market for that, for lack of a better word. Maybe maybe the desire to assimilate and fit in is just contradictory to wanting to stand out in that way. I don't think you're going to see Ray Benson doing anything to recording any songs that relate to his Jewishness. And a couple of people that I interviewed for Kosher Country were almost hesitant to, it felt like I was outing them. And I wasn't. I mean, obviously they gave permission to be quoted in the article, but I just sensed that they were very reserved about, and maybe even uncomfortable about discussing their Judaism, not because necessarily they were ashamed of it, but because there is this pressure to fit in. And I don't think that that's changed. Just the very history of it. Jews have been a part of every aspect virtually from day one. And it is so little known and so unpublicized. And that's why I think my article particularly needs to be updated, because as I was thinking about it, there have been so many changes. I think I quoted in the article the number of Jews in country music in Nashville at the time, based on a figure I was given by someone affiliated with the Jewish Community Center. I don't know how you determine how many Jews are in the music industry, but I would hazard to guess, if you were to ask me how many are in it now, but I would think it would be several times that. But here again, I think there's a hesitancy to talk about something like that as factual as it is, because of the stereotypes that remain. You don't want to say that there are X number of Jews in country music and then we're involved in all of these different aspects of the business, because that lends credence to the stereotype of the Jews are taking over or they own or whatever, that anybody would be uncomfortable with.
Once again, this episode only scratches the surface of the history of Jewish country music. We recommend checking out the Go Deeper section of our monthly emails to learn more. You can find these emails anytime on the ISJL Virtual Vacation website. So before we continue, we wanted to briefly mention a couple of prominent Jewish performers and songwriters who rose to fame in the 1970s, making Jewish identity more outwardly visible in country music circles. This includes controversial Texan performer Kinky Friedman, who mixed self-deprecating humor with satire to poke fun at racism and anti-Semitism through songs like "They Ain't Making Jews Like Jesus Anymore." In addition, Shel Silverstein is best known for his children poetry books, like The Giving Tree and Where the Sidewalk Ends. But he was also a talented country music songwriter, responsible for Johnny Cash's A Boy Named Sue. Other Jewish performers came to fame in the 1980s and 90s, including Ray Benson, lead singer of the popular Western swing revival band Asleep at the Wheel. Benson is open about his Jewish identity, but does not incorporate it into his music. Now that we've learned more about the history of Jews in the Nashville country music industry, the big question is, what does Jewish country music look like now? It wasn't really until the first decade of the 21st century that the attempt to wed Jewish religious themed lyrics more fully with traditional Appalachian and country music styles really came to the forefront. Since the early 2000s, a small number of musicians have begun to find audiences for Jewish country music in synagogues and other Jewish and non-Jewish spaces. These musicians aren't limited to one single Jewish identity, but come from a variety of backgrounds and denominations. To give us a sense of the ways in which contemporary artists use country music to express and explore their Judaism, we spoke with Joe Buchanan, a dear friend of the ISJL. A Texas native, Joe Buchanan celebrates Judaism through Americana music. Joe's music is a blend of Southern soul and country charm, grounded in the belief that there is always room at the table. His work emphasizes both his identity as a convert to Judaism and the ways in which country music tradition might connect with Jewish thought and practice. We spoke with Joe about his Jewish journey, his music, and what inspires him. Joe even played a few songs for us.
Yeah, 100%. My name is Joe Buchanan. I'm a country music artist from Houston, Texas, and I make country music that is really steeped in the Torah, in our sort of human experience, and also everything that I've learned since my conversion 8 years ago informs all of the music that I do. Spent a lot of time, all over the country, and now that we don't do that anymore, at least for a while, I spend a lot of time on Zoom talking to great people and playing for communities and all that good stuff. Yeah, 100%. So really that sort of comes from the story of my conversion to Judaism. Can I share that with you? I'll give you the Reader's Digest version of it as best I can. So I grew up very disconnected from God and well, not really from God, but from formal organized religion. My grandfather gave me a simple idea of God. He said, God's in the world. You can see it in people. You can see God in people and the way people work. And God made sense to me as a kid. He said, if God wants anything from you, do good stuff with your life. I was like, great. My grandpa was not Jewish, at least as far as I know. I never saw any Bibles or anything in the house. So he was what we would call like an armchair preacher, right? Like nothing in there that informed anything that he was saying, but it was just kind of coming from the heart, you know, it's where he spoke from. And I love my grandfather. He was my hero. I still buy a skin bracer because my grandfather wore it, and Old Spice. Anyway, so I grew up with this idea that God made sense, right? Do good stuff in the world, you know, take care of yourself, take care of others, and that's what God wants, live a good life. Well, as I grew up, I started really getting hit with this idea that there was something wrong with me, right? You start hearing enough times, what's wrong with you? Or being told, look, you know, you're not good enough for God, you're not good enough for this. That was sort of the education I was getting from a formal standpoint growing up, and it was the wrong thing to take on as a young person. I started believing that I wasn't good enough for the world. It was not a great experience. Nobody's fault. It's just what happened. And then I met my wife. I fell crazy in love with my wife the second that I saw her. Madly in love with her. And I played her a song. We were married shortly after, so music totally worked. And you know, she really wasn't into talking about God or anything like that, but I had a lot of questions, and we weren't finding any answers, so we just stopped looking again. Fast forward 13 years into our marriage, we're outside the Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C., and she tells me she wants to get in touch with her people's faith. And I said, well, who's that? Who are you? That's a weird thing for anybody to say. Somebody says my people, you should immediately start like being very concerned, right? I was like, who are your people? And she's like, I'm Jewish. She looks at me like I'm crazy. And I said, wait a minute. What do you mean you're Jewish? Like, how did you get Jewish? And she's like, I was born Jewish. And I'm like, that's not a thing. You can't just be born Jewish. And she's like, Joe, that's how it works. And I start mansplaining to my wife, right? I'm like, I don't know if you know how it works. Like, you've never talked about this. And she goes, Joe, my mom's Jewish. I said, I know that, but that just makes you Jewish? She's like, oh my God, you don't know how it works. And I said, well, I feel like we need to find a rabbi. She's like, Joe, our son's Jewish. And I went, what? I said, does he know that? And she goes, I don't think he does now. And I was like, we shouldn't tell him. So that is such a true story, and it sounds crazy to me every time I say it out loud, but we went and we found a rabbi. And, you know, April, there was no observance in our home. There was no talk about Judaism or being Jewish or anything. She thought I just knew that because her mom was Jewish that she was Jewish, but I didn't. And so we find a rabbi, and this is what he said to me, and this is really what kicked off all the songwriting. It's a long way around the barn to get to the front door for this question, I'll be honest. But I told him, I said, we walk in the door, and Stuart Federow here in Houston, Texas, and this guy's like a mountain. It's like 7 foot tall, you know, and he's like, hi, I'm Stuart the rabbi. That's an approved impression, by the way. He approved it. And I said, hi, my name's Joe. It's my wife, April. They're Jewish. I'm not. And none of us know really what that means. And he goes, I got you. He goes, you want me to sum up Judaism? I said, yes, please. He goes, all right. He said, there's one God, and there's nothing wrong with you. He said, you're great exactly as you are. You're loved by your Creator exactly as you are. And you don't have to do anything to be loved by God. It's done. You don't have to be Jewish or anything else to be loved by God. You're part of creation. You're tied to it. He said, you do good because it brings more good in the world, not for a reward or some fear of a punishment later on. The good you bring in the world is the reward, and you're living the gift right now, and you got to take care of it. That was like 30 years of therapy at once. It was like talking to my grandfather all over again. And everything that I dove feet first into conversion. My son was like, yeah, this makes sense. Let's do it. April was on board. And everything I learned through that process just solidified even more that this was the place I'd been looking for. So I turned to songwriting. You know, I've been writing music for a long time, and I was never really connecting with the stuff I was writing. Well, suddenly there was a lot that I wanted to tell people. And, you know, I drew on my influences. I grew up on country western, classic rock, you know, really old country, more, of course, at the time I say modern country, we're talking about like 90s country, right? But I drew on those influences because it was the music that I loved. I didn't even know Jewish music was a thing. I had no clue. So I had no basis for comparison. Like someone came up to me once and said, hey, do do you know any Debbie Friedman? And I was like, who? And the color like drained out of their face. They were like, how could you? I'm like, how can I? I have no idea. Of course, now I'm very familiar with Debbie's music and I know who that is. But that's how I got into Jewish songwriting, if you want the long answer. Somebody heard me share a service that I was working on, and I got invited to other communities. And before you know it, it was like I'm sitting down talking to my wife, and I was like, I think this is something. And she was like, we need to figure out what this is, and just kind of went from there. Yeah, so talking about like those influences, right? We had a ranch down in South Texas, right near the Mexican border, in a place called Spofford, Texas. Spofford, Texas was mostly a lot of abandoned homes, railroad tracks, and then there was this big ranch that my grandfather had. And on that ranch, it sounds like the beginning of a song, right? And on that ranch, there was a jukebox, a little Wurlitzer jukebox over by the bar, and it was full of Marty Robbins and George Strait and George Jones and all that stuff. So that was the soundtrack to the best times of my youth, was that music. And so when I started writing Jewish music, you want to find what inspires you. You want to bring that kind of good feeling to it. And everything that I was learning about Judaism was it was full of hope and promise and this real honest to goodness amazingness that we're great and we can start from here. And so many people don't know that. Like, you can say that. The motivational industry is one of the biggest industries out there, right? But so why do we keep saying over and over and over, you're great. You're great right now and you can start right now, because it's true. It's so true. But we have to hear it sometimes so many times for it to sink in. Well, Judaism helped deliver that message to me in a very strong and powerful way. And I thought, well, if this does so much healing for me, I want to try to do that for other people and share that message. But, I think Judaism and country music pair so well. It really does. I mean, it's the storytelling art, right? All country songs are stories. Sometimes great stories, sometimes terrible stories, but there's always an arc. There's always a story. And I think we as a people have so many stories to tell. And one of the beautiful things I think about Jewish music is that we can explore so many different themes and ideas, and we can struggle. Struggle is an inherent part of who we are. And I don't know. I mean, there are a lot of musical styles that deal with struggle, but country music is a beautiful, beautiful struggling and storytelling art, and it was just a perfect fit. It really was. I was very concerned about how it would be accepted. Because I wasn't trying to do anything from like what's the word, kitsch, right? I wasn't trying to be like cute or clever with it, or like there's a snake in my boot, like that kind of thing. I mean, I wanted to be very authentic because it means a lot to me, and I wanted to represent it as best I could and bring these two things together in a way that's very authentic, and because to me it is. And I think we've done that, especially with this last album. I'm really, really proud of the work that we did on there, and we took our time with it. But yeah, it's been amazing, and it has thankfully been very accepted. But at the same time, it's like if you're gonna make the music that you're gonna make it, and you're gonna be authentic about it, you're not trying to make music that is just going to appeal to as many people as possible, right? We're not trying to write jingles or commercials. We're trying to tell these stories in music. Not everybody's going to agree with it. Not everybody's going to like it. And I'm really okay with that, because I don't have the expectation that everybody's supposed to love something, right? They're going to love what they love. And, what's the phrase? You can't be everybody's cup of tea, but you can be somebody's shot of whiskey, and I'm happy to be that. So. Yeah, I think it's a multifold role. The role of a musician when it comes to, I think, shows and concerts, right? They show up, they do their thing, they engage folks, they give folks what they came there for, and then they leave. And I think in the Jewish world, it's very different. You're building a relationship. You're building a huge amount of trust. You're carrying a sacred tradition with you everywhere you go, so you want to make sure you're always honoring that and taking care of that, and you're displaying that. You're usually a single individual or a group of individuals in front of a huge room of folks who have all come there to see both their culture reflected, their stories reflected, and to have information shared in new and beautiful ways. And if it's a prayer experience, you're the biggest job that you've got is, I think, not just bringing the room together or like people singing together, because I'm also not one of those people that's like, now you sing. I'm like, no, if people don't want to sing, they shouldn't have to, right? Or they shouldn't feel like they have to. But you want to give folks lots of permission to just be who they are and for them to feel okay with who they are. So I feel like my role in the Jewish music world is to highlight things maybe that we're not talking about, or things that maybe there's a different perspective on, or whether that's values or stories in the Torah or things like that. And then also to guide, through prayer, and to help be a guide for folks, and to really hold the door for people so that they can, walk through that door if they want to, or help guide folks in. I think it's really important. I think it's really important that we hold the door for people as much as possible. And I think music is a great way to do that. Well, I mean, there's like we talked about a little bit before, right? Like all the storytelling art and whatnot. One of the things that's been a big, I was about to say inspirer. I don't know if that's a word. One of the big inspirations for me when it comes to this music and informing, from growing up listening on the road with my grandmother back in the day, driving to that ranch, which was like 8.5 hours away, 9 hours away. Texas is a big state, right? It's like a couple of days to get across it. But we're talking long, long drives, listening to nothing but these amazing storytellers, listening to Kenny Rogers and George Jones and Marty Robbins, like all these people with these incredible stories. And when you look at the Torah, when you look at the stories in there, it's like, that's all the same stuff. You look at Ruth, saying, I'm not going to do this anymore. Now I'm going to do this. I'm leaving this, walking away and walking into this new thing bravely, right? You look at the story of Adam and Eve, and you see this gorgeous coming of age tale, with between God and Adam and Eve, and growing up and taking ownership of their lives and responsibility. Then they go out in the world and they toil and they struggle and they got to build their lives. And there's a beautiful midrash that says, near the end of all of that time, God approaches Adam and Eve and says, okay, now you can come back in the garden. You can come on back. There's no pain in there, right? There's no worry. There's no fear. You can come back to that. And then Eve looks at Adam and looks around at the life that they've built together, this life that they've worked through that's been so hard but so fulfilling because they did it. And they look around and they say, our home is here. And if that's not a country song, I don't know what is, right? There's so much country music, I think in the Torah. It makes so much sense. There's so much in there that's heartbreaking. The story of, can I tell you one more? There was a tune on our second album called The Unbinding that is based on the binding of Isaac, but it's told from Isaac's viewpoint to his father, begging him to remember the person that he was, that person that believed in the goodness of others. And here standing over him in this version of it is this broken man, this father who has vented his anger at the world on his son. And it really, struck us as this needs to get written. We got to do this, right? And you pull on all that. If you were to listen to a lot of the tunes on the second album, there's a lot of steel guitar on there. There's a lot of George Strait influence. There's a little bit Hank Williams Jr. influence on there, a little honky tonk. So it's a lot of that. It's a lot of that stuff. I play the same music in shuls and communities that I do at bars. So we were at South by Southwest, and it was Friday night, and I'm up there, and I looked at the bar, and the bar is just packed, and we're sitting there playing, and I said, it's Friday night, everybody, and they were like, yeah. I said, that means it's Shabbos, Shabbos, and everybody goes, Shabbos. Had no idea, I think, by and large, what they were saying. So we roar into the Shalom Aleichem, and our slide player just tearing it up, like playing so well that, like, you make that face like you just smelled something terrible, where you're like, oh, that he's such a great guitar player, and he's just destroying this thing. And by the end of it, we got to the end of it, and we ended up lighting candles. And a fella at the bar comes up to me when we finished our whole set, and he goes, man, was that Hebrew? And I said, yeah, there was some Hebrew in there. And he goes, hey, man, I'm Jewish. And I said, that's cool. You don't have to whisper about that. I have a lot of folks they ask, what do I call this? Right? What do you call this music? And you can call it Jewish country if you want, or you can just call it country music. Because I figure if, now I can't remember her name at all. It doesn't matter. There's a lot of country music that is about everyday stuff. There's some country music that is very focused on Christian stuff. And so I look at it like it's a broad spectrum, right? And it can tell a lot of different stories. And ultimately, at the end of the day, it's a storytelling medium. It's a way to communicate ideas and feelings and kavanah and all this kind of stuff, and to recreate, and nostalgia and all of this. And so it seemed like a really perfect fit, and I think it is the right medium to deliver this kind of stuff, because you can say so much in country music. You can do so much in country music. You can kick your shoes off a little bit, and that's okay. You can pop a top, and that's okay. Or you can have really tender moments. I'm a fan of, I'm a terrible dancer. My wife loves dancing with me. Thank God, because I'm a really bad dancer. But I love slow dances. We're dance in the kitchen, dance at the grocery store kind of people. And so one of the tunes that we put on the album was called Lighthouses, and it was around the idea that we're supposed to be a light unto the nations. But sometimes people really shine so brightly that they can pull people out of dark places, and that's a beautiful aspect of being a light, right? We talk about being the candle in the darkness, and sometimes we're so much even brighter than that. And so when we wrote the tune, I wanted to recall that feeling of dancing with somebody, somebody that you love and care about deeply. And what does that very personal, very emotional, very close, intimate feeling feel like? And when you are sharing all of this, what somebody has meant to you. And, so when we wrote the tune, we went to the old kind of slow dance songs. It was funny when we recorded it. At the very end of the song, there's this really slow kind of wind down at the end before it just sort of lets go. And our drummer was like, why does it slow down like that? I feel like we could kind of end it on, kind of thing. I'm like, no. So you got to visualize this. This is the end of the tune when, the song is wound down and you hold on a little bit longer, and you just soak up kind of what's happened. And you got to have enough time to slowly walk off the dance floor. And they were like, oh, we get it. I'm like, right, that's the vibe, right? So, and you get that in country music. It holds on to you a little bit longer. And that's really important. I think especially when you look at prayer services, when you look at a lot of Jewish music, where we take these pauses, these moments to let what we've just done soak in. When I go through a prayer service, or at least when I lead a prayer service, I try to take just a pause near the end of each prayer. Let's just, before we rush into the next thing, let's just absorb what we just did. And so we try to work some of those things into our music as well. And I think country music creates all of those beats. It's all there. And I didn't even think about it being there when we started. At first, it was just like, I love country music, and I'm going to write stuff like this. And then we found all this as we did it. And we're like, it's all there. Every color, every paintbrush that we need to tell these stories is there, and it's all important. One of the things that gets mentioned a lot also is Americana. Right. So someone asked me, well, is your music country or Americana? I think it's by and large country, but it also fits. There's a lot of Americana in there too. And I describe Americana like this. So imagine country music and folk music had a baby, right? And that baby was raised by Uncle Bluegrass and Uncle Blues. And then Uncle Rock and Roll, Aunt Rock and Roll came in and takes the kid to Six Flags. Like, that kid is Americana music, right? It's influenced by all these different things, and it's a beautiful spectrum of music. It really is. It really is. And it's nice seeing so many people make this music. It's nice seeing that this is out there in so many different ways. It's kind of amazing. It's really great. And I think it's also great that people feel comfortable doing that. There's been a real change. There's been a real change, I think, and Jewish music is always changing and evolving, but I think we're at that part where there's a big change happening now, where it's draw on your influences and what moves you, and bring what moves you into what moves you spiritually and Jewishly and all these things, right? Add those two things together and see what you can create as an artist. Who are you? As opposed to going, well, you have to make music in this style, or you have to make music in this style. Now people, I think the door is really open, the permission's there because of people like Debbie Friedman, who really laid the groundwork for, she did it her way, and gave a lot of permission for folks to do that. I think it's really beautiful heritage that we've inherited as Jews and as Jewish artists and songwriters. Yeah, I mean, it changed completely, right? The second that the pandemic hit, we started hearing from communities and started reaching out to communities about postponing dates and things like that. And so everything was sort of put on the back burner there. And I sat down, had a long talk with my wife, and I said, we got to figure out what we're doing. You know, people wanted to do bookings, but we couldn't get there. We can't get there and do those things. So, you know, like everybody, we turned to Zoom, and thankfully I had all this studio equipment that I was like, well, let's put this to use, right? If we're not going to record an album, let's start throwing it all together and seeing if we can present something really great for folks. So there's a couple of things that we did. So we're doing, you know, these Americana Shabbat Friday nights. We're still doing those bookings in communities and still doing community concerts, like we did one for the ISJL. And so we're still doing these things, but we wanted a way to deliver services to folks who maybe they're not part of a shul. Maybe they don't belong to a shul. Maybe they're just curious about what it means to go to Shabbat. Maybe they're Jewish and they've never taken in a different kind of service, but they want to check something out. Or they're just like, I want to know what Shabbat looks like. I'm not Jewish, but what do they do, right? So there was all these folks that were like, how do we bring some services to a lot of people that doesn't cost them anything? And how do we do it consistently? So on our Facebook page, we started doing these tableside Shabbat services. And we put a CDOR together, made it free, downloadable CDOR for folks. And every single Friday night, you know, at 8 p.m. Central, there is about an hour-long musical Shabbat service. Different themes, a lot of the same music, introduce new tunes, but it's also very conversational and guided, but it's there, it's consistent. And the community around that has really developed in a very surprising way. It's gotten pretty large. We were really, like I said, we were like, wow, this is something, you know, and it's been great being able to connect to folks through this. I think they've definitely helped me through this in a really big way, and they've now formed their own separate group. They call themselves the Board, and they have Onegs on Friday nights there in their private Zoom that they get together with all the folks that come to that service, and it's completely wild. It's been a beautiful thing, but we, you know, and that just started, like I said, from talking to my wife and going, what can we do, and how do we do more of it? The other thing we started doing was reading bedtime stories, which I thought would be just a fun, quick, short thing that we would do. We started reading Hank the Cow Dog, which is a Texas children's book. And let me show you this. Oh, this is so much fun to talk about. So we started, as a goof, we started reading Hank the Cow Dog. And I was like, this is I don't want to say like on brand, but it seems like a kind of book that I would probably read if I was going to read a kid's book. But again, we didn't expect it to last very long. And so we started doing a chapter a week, and we got through a book. Well, the next thing I know, I was like, thanks so much. That was a lot of fun. It was a short Wednesday night thing. And the community was like, we want you to keep reading Hank the Cow Dog. And I'm like, well, let me look and see if there's another book I want to get from there, and I'll read it. So then, like that week, a box shows up at my house with 75 Hank the Cow Dog books. They bought every single book in the series so that for the rest of my life, I would be reading Hank the Cow Dog. Look at this box. I mean, I can't even. There's just stacks of these books. Stacks of Hank the Cow Dog. We've reached out to the author of this book series, John R. Erickson, to be like, we are reading these books. Is this okay? And it is, but good grief. Anyway, so, and, you know, plus Hank the Cow Dog. It's been so much fun. So those are some of the things that we've done. We still do all the shows and services, but it's all done virtually for communities and organizations and things. But these Friday nights on our Facebook page have really, really kind of taken off in a surprising way. And then, of course, Wednesday night. If y'all need a bedtime story, I mean, Hank the Cow Dog, 7:30 p.m. Central. We do all the voices, all that nonsense. We now have a mascot. We bought a puppet named Duke. So Duke is the official mascot. He brings a new sponsor each week. I had never expected this to happen, but there's a lot that happens when you're stuck in your house for a year and a half. Anywho, that's what the longest march in history has brought on. But it's weird to say this out loud because you never want to say that something awful, which this has been awful. I mean, I've experienced a lot of things in my lifetime, a lot of very hard, challenging things that have come about in the world, and this is huge. This is massive to go through this as a global community, to go through this. But there is something that has come out of it that I think I'm glad that this came out of that, because it's something that we should hold on to. And it is that in a time when people have been told you can't get together, you can't stay together, you can't be together, that we have found new, more innovative, and incredible ways to be together. We're more together, I think, in a lot of ways now than even we were when we could be together in person for a lot of us. It's amazing. It's amazing that we've done that as a people and figured out. And when it comes to like Jewish communities and going, well, we can't have services for those communities that were holding out on streaming. Well, now they're streaming. Great. Now they're streaming and joining up with other folks and doing these big joint services and all this kind of stuff. It's incredible. It's just incredible. And I hope that when this new normal has faded some and we go back to even just a hint of where we were at before, I hope we take all of this. I hope we take all of the goodness that we found in each other and with each other and for each other, and I hope we bring that to where we're going. We should take this where we're going. I think it's so important. It's wildly inspiring seeing what people have done. It's just incredible. And I think about that so often. It always makes me feel good. It makes me look forward with a lot of hope, seeing all the good people are doing. It's just amazing. Just amazing. Well, I think the thing that I wish everybody knew about my tune specifically is that it was written for them. I always tell people when I do shows and stuff, I always say, like, we have a merch stand. There's T-shirts, there's CDs, there's signed stuff, all that. But you don't need to go over there. Go find that stuff. It's on YouTube for free. It's on, they have that topic thing. It has the whole album on there. It's on Spotify. It's on Apple. Just go listen to it. You don't need to buy it. I don't want you to buy it. If money gets in the way of you hearing these songs that were written for you, forget the money. Just go hear the music because it really, truly is for you. And because I've had people ask, well, who is this music for? And I'm like, I'm talking to them. It's for you. Well, do I have to be Jewish? Absolutely not. It's for you, specifically you. Go listen to it, please. So that's definitely what I want. And for country music, I hope that country music keeps innovating. I hope it keeps moving forward. I think you see that, right? Country music has such a wide breadth now that it is. I thought it was funny when Lil Nas X came out with Old Town Road, and there were people that were like, that's not country music. And I was like, wait a minute. If y'all want to start defining what is and is not country music, you should have done that 15 years ago, It's so many things. It's so much. I love that song, by the way. It was funny. I did a show for a bunch of soldiers. And there was like 600 soldiers in this room, and we did a prayer service together, and it was great. And then at the end of it, someone shouted, "Play Old Town Road." And I was like, really? I said, okay, I'll do it, but like, y'all got to sing it with me. 600 soldiers singing Old Town Road was amazing. I mean, like that shook the roof. It was great. Anyway, my hope for country music is that it keeps innovating, but I hope it also continues to keep looking back. You see people like Chris Stapleton come in, with his music. You see people like Sturgill Simpson, right? You see all these folks coming in, bringing sort of this, here's where we were, here's what it sounds like now, right? So you've got to be reaching forward and behind the whole time with country music. So I think it's beautiful to not lose traditions, but to also create new ones at the same time. I think if you do that, then I think country music's in a really, really good place if we can keep doing that. Absolutely. It's going to be 3 tunes. I'm going to play a song called Sing a Song, which is based off Lachuna Ranana. It was about miracles. It was inspired by my son going, "Hey, Dad, do you believe that everything is divinely planned?" And I said, absolutely not. And he said, "You're right." And I was like, well, I didn't realize it was a test, but why am I right? And he said, he goes, because if everything is divinely planned, then our choices don't matter, and our choices have to matter. I said, great. Yeah, that's exactly. And he's like, great. My son's like my little rabbi. And then he goes, well, do you think everything is chaos? And I said, no, absolutely not. I said, I think God creates opportunities, and we get to take advantage of those opportunities. And he was like, right on. He said, and I think that middle part, right in between those things, he said, I think that's where God is. It's like, wow, that's amazing. So we wrote a tune about that called Sing a Song. I'm going to play that for you. I'm also going to play a song called Texas, which was inspired by Texas, because this is where God and I first met. This is where I really first started digging deep into beliefs. And, I've never been to Israel, but it's a question that comes up all the time. People are like, have you been to Israel? No, I've never been. I go, look, that's an expensive plane ticket. It's an expensive stay, and I don't have that kind of scratch. Like, no, I've never been to Israel. Someday, yes, and I'm excited to go, but I've never been. But I got invited by the El Paso Jewish Federation to do a concert for Israel Independence Day, and I was like, I've never been to Israel. They were like, it's fine. The rabbi loves your music. I said, okay. They said, it's Israeli folk music, right? I said, no, it's not. But I said, are you sure you want me? They're like, the rabbi loves it. It's going to be great. So, so I went, and when I was there, we had all these folks, and we're all talking about Israel and the things. I can't speak from firsthand experience because I've never been, but talked about like what has inspired me that I've heard from folks. And then I told everybody, I said, but I've never been to Israel. And you could hear a pin drop in the room. And I said, but I have been to Texas. And somebody in the back goes, ow, like that. I was like, well, this is going to go over great. So I'm going to play that tune for you. And then the last song is based on Hashkivenu. I don't write a lot of prayer melodies, because I want to approach those very, very carefully. Prayer is so deep, and it's a well that is just as deep as you can possibly go. And so if you're going to approach that, you have to be very careful about how you approach it, right? In my opinion, that it's not just, here's a good melody, and it mashes with this, right? It has to all really make sense and work. Houston, Hurricane Harvey blew through here, and it was devastating. And I mean, there are people in the city that, when it rains really hard, they experience this incredible anxiety because of everything that they went through. I mean, I know a family that has rebuilt their house a number of times. Schools, our JCC had, furniture floating to the ceiling. It was bad. And I thought, how hard is it to hold on to hope during things like that? To look outside and to go to sleep at night knowing we're safe, we're protected, we're sheltered, when you look outside and you can't see it anywhere, right? It's okay to struggle with prayer, but then the next day, what happens? Or you're watching the news and you see people forming human chains to help pull people out of cars, and you're like, oh, there's God in our actions, right? People charging outside to start taking down trees out of the street and helping neighbors rebuild their homes. People that don't know each other are learning how to do drywall all of a sudden because they have to. There's God in us. And in doing this, and so it was. So I wrote the Hashkivenu based on kind of that struggle and release as well. So those are the three tunes that I'll be playing for you. Yeah, well, if you ask me, do I believe in miracles? I'd say, yes, I do, yes, I do. How can I believe in what I cannot see? Well, my friends, I can see you. It's a little less than fate, a lot more than chance that brings beautiful strangers our way. So yes, I believe, in miracles, and I believe they happen every day. So come on, sing a song to the one that has loved you for so long. We'll sing, now sing a song to the one that has loved you for so long. Lechu neranana ladonai naria letzor yeshenu nekad mafanav betoda bizmirod narialo. Sing a song to the one that has loved you for so long. Sing, now sing a song to the one that has loved you for so long. If you ask me, do I believe in miracles? I'd say, yes, I do, yes, I do. Well, how can I believe in what I cannot see? Well, my friends, I can see you. It's a little less than fate and a lot more than chance that brings beautiful strangers our way. So yes, I believe, in miracles, and I believe they happen every day. Well, I've never been to Israel, but I floated the Frio River. They don't make hummus at Neil's. They make a mean chicken dinner. The mesquite trees and them singing leaves, well, they always remind me of God. Floating back in tubes, well, it feels so darn good that it might get outlawed. Yeah, now Texas is like a holy land to me. It's a place where the heavens feel close, yeah, where God taught me to see. Well, if I don't make my way, don't make my way across that sea someday, I'll be glad I lived in Texas, where I first found the reason to pray. Oh, pick it up. When I was a kid, I was trouble born, trouble did. No one thought I'd make it to 15. I was such a mess. Well, the struggling, well, I did my best, and the getting good was getting pretty lean. I believe God's where you are. We met under that lone star between you and God. There ain't no one between. If you're feeling down, well, my friend, just come on down to the state where the name means anything but mean. Hey, now Texas is like a holy land to me. Oh, yeah. It's a place where the heavens feel close, yeah, what God taught me to see. Well, if I don't make my way across that sea someday, I'll be glad I lived in Texas, where I first found the reason to pray. I'll be glad I lived in Texas, where I first found the reason to pray. I'll be glad I lived in Texas, where I first found the reason, yeah, to pray. Hey! Oh, goodness. We'll spread out the shelter over us and guide us so in love. Yeah, shield us from the storm that blows our way. Well, there's shelter in the shadow of your wings. Hashki Venu Adonai Eloheinu L'Shalom V'Hamidenu Shomreinu L'Chaim. Lay us down, Lord, lay us down. We're down, oh down in peace. You raise us with eyes to see that there's shelter in the shadow of your wings. Hashki Venu Adonai Eloheinu L'Shalom V'Hamidenu Shomreinu L'Chaim. Hashki Venu Adonai Eloheinu L'Shalom V'Hamidenu Malkeinu L'Chaim. Well, we pray for life, Lord, and we pray for peace.
But now and when the drums are at ease, yeah, well, blessed always the one who gave us breath. And you saved us so we can live what we've got left. Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu Le'shalom Le'amidenu Shomreinu Le'chaim. Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu Le'shalom Le'amidenu Malkeinu Le'chaim. But yeah, there's shelter in the shadow of your wings. But there's shelter in the shadow of your wings. But there's shelter in the shadow of your wings.
Thank you so much, Joe. So, from the history of Jewish involvement in the country music industry to the music being produced by contemporary Jewish performers, we've covered a lot in today's episode. Although Jews in country music industry have mostly been in behind-the-scene roles, the intersection of Judaism and Americana music has evolved throughout the past several decades, resulting in artists like Joe Buchanan, who are now exploring Jewish identity through country music.
Clara, thank you so much for introducing us to this history and for showing us how this connection between Jews and country music is still vibrant and active in the present. What do you think this story tells us about the Southern Jewish experience or the broader American Jewish experience?
For American Jews in the 20th century, the country music industry could serve as a place for experimentation or pave the way for lifelong careers, but the culture surrounding the music could be alienating. Jewish country music represents broader themes of assimilation and potentially indicates Jewish musicians' desire to be perceived as part of a distinctly American culture. Of course, music also serves as a platform for expression, allowing the Jewish community to explore their identity through popular culture.
So in our March episode, we're going to talk about klezmer and bluegrass. I know that while we were working on these episodes, we were both surprised by all of the Jewish connections in the American roots world. Can you tease the upcoming episode for us?
Sure. I think folks often associate bluegrass and country music with Christianity. A lot of country and bluegrass performers are really open about their faith and incorporate Christian themes and lyrics into their music. But Jews have been involved in the American roots world as performers, songwriters, producers, and more since the 1950s, and in some cases even earlier than that. Many contemporary artists find ways to celebrate Judaism and Jewish tradition in their music. Next month, we're going to talk about what klezmer and bluegrass music have in common, and also show some of the ways that artists are blending these two musical traditions. We are also excited to announce that the March episode will feature a conversation with Nefesh Mountain, the acclaimed Jewish bluegrass duo. They even did an exclusive performance for us that you definitely don't want to miss.
I seriously cannot wait. If you want to listen to some Jewish country and bluegrass music, there's a playlist linked on the ISJL Virtual Vacation website. It features the artists we mentioned in this episode and many more. You can and should also check out Joe Buchanan's latest album, Back from Babylon, available everywhere you can stream and purchase music. Thank you so much for tuning in to this month's episode of the ISJL Virtual Vacation. Our next episode, all about klezmer and bluegrass, premieres on Facebook and YouTube on Tuesday, March 23rd at 11 a.m. Central Time. Mark your calendars now for another engaging episode filled with great music, including an interview with Nefesh Mountain. They also played some songs for us that you do not want to miss. If you want friendly reminders about upcoming episodes, cool resources about our episode topics, and great Southern and Jewish content in your inbox a couple times a month, sign up for the ISJL Virtual Vacation newsletter. Visit our website to learn more. Thank you so much, everybody. We'll see you next time.